All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Chris Lee. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager for VMware. Been with VMware for about 5-6 years now. Joined right after VeloCloud was acquired by VMware. But before that, I was in the industry for about 20-some years, working on routing, switching, security. So very familiar with the space. I was a technical product manager at one point, and then became a product manager, now a product marketing manager. So my technical skills been going down quite a bit. But together with me, I have Kieran Roach from Co-Evolve. Kieran, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. So Kieran Roach, I'm co-founder and CTO of Co-Evolve. We're about a 10-year-old business that really specializes in managed SD-WAN, SSE, SASE type solutions for global enterprises. So I'll speak a bit more about the business in a while, but yeah, like Chris, I've kind of followed an increasingly less hands-on technical role over my career, but really across 22 years helping enterprises build internet-centric networks. And that's a far more accepted position now than it was 20 years ago. So it's been an interesting journey to go along with that. So really looking forward to talking about this topic today and answering any questions that come up as well. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Kieran. All right, so a disclaimer. You want to have a seat?
Yeah, I'll have a seat and I'll come back, yeah.
A quick disclaimer. So I don't think we're going to talk about roadmap today, but in case it comes up, please don't make your purchasing decision based on that information, okay? Now, let's talk about the topic for today. So I think about less than a year ago, we got acquired by Broadcom, right? And Broadcom specifically carved out a business unit just to address everything at the edge of the network. And that includes ECS, or Edge Computing Stack, right? Which we're going to talk about today. It also includes a product called SD-WAN, or SASE, right? It has remote access, it has SD-WAN, it has security by Symantec. And then we also play in the networking and telco space, where our infrastructure enables the telcos to deploy the 5G infrastructure, for example, right? So, there's a lot of talk about edge AI and what it means. So when people usually talk about AI, they think about, computing, right? They think about machine learning and all that technology. But edge AI also means that computing is happening at the edge of the network, but you also need to transport a lot of data back to the data center, to the cloud, for machine learning, for processing, okay? So 3 layers of the network enabling you to do edge AI, and we would call that a cookie, Oreo cookie, right? 3 layers. It's better if you consume all 3 layers at the same time. So that's why some of you have Oreo cookies with you right now. Okay? All right, let's talk about agenda. So before we talk about the product, I want to go over the industry trends, so you know the challenges that we're trying to solve. And then I'm going to talk about the solution itself. Kieran is going to come back on stage and talk about one of his customers and how they deploy ECS on top of SD-WAN. And then we're going to open up the floor for Q&A. All right, so let's talk about trends. According to Gartner, by the year 2027, that's about 3 years from now, 50% of the data generated is going to be outside of the data center or the cloud, okay? From 20% in 2023. So in 4 years, it goes from 20% to more than 50%. And the reason for that is because of all the new use cases that we have at the edge of the network. If you look at, the applications, for example, we have, a computer vision replacing closed circuit TV. So you no longer have a person watching 20 screens, right? You can have one person looking at 1,000 screens. Only when something happens, computer vision is going to alarm you. So for example, if you're monitoring an unmanned site, like a cell phone tower, and someone breaks in, right, it's going to raise an alarm and alert you. So there's a lot of computing power needed there, use of AI, ML, and virtualization of all the workloads in the manufacturing space. We have customers virtualizing PLCs, or programmable logic controllers. They have a lot of industrial PCs on the floor, and they're doing the same thing they've been doing, in the data center for a long time, right? Which is consolidating all these services together on a single platform. So lots and lots of applications are running at the edge of the network. And it's happening in all the verticals, right? So one of the questions that people usually ask is, hey, I have this data center stuff figured out, right? I already have a bunch of workloads in the data center. Why can't I send everything back to the data center and process there? The problem is, we have just too much data generated at the edge, right? You cannot simply send everything back. The connectivity may be really poor because these edge deployment may be in the middle of nowhere, right? Oil rig, mining, right? So you only have maybe 5G or satellite, and there's some regulatory requirements as well. So there are a lot of challenges at the edge of the network, and I highlighted 5 here, okay? This is like a flip side of data center. In data center, you have a lot of computing resources, right? But at the edge, you only have 1, 2, or 3 computes. Because of space, heat requirement, cooling, you don't have too much, right? You have many, many sites. You can have 100 to 1,000 sites or more, limited network, and there's no IT staff at the site. Okay, so therefore security is very lax. So in today's session, I'm not going to talk too much about limited compute because we have a product that will address that. It's called ECS, or Edge Computing Service. But I'm going to talk about how ECS leverages VMware SD-WAN to address the rest of the challenges here. Okay? All right, really quick about ECS. I think there are still a couple of breakout sessions available today and tomorrow. If not, please make sure you watch replay of ECS sessions. But what we did was we took the vSphere and ESXi product and we optimized it for the edge. So we make it leaner, and at the same time, we also have a few new features. One of them is real-time applications, like the manufacturing use case that I talk about, right? In manufacturing, everything is real-time. When something happens, you want the server to stop right away. You want the spinning blade to stop right away, right? So that's where real-time comes in. And we also simplify the operations so that customers can use SD-WAN to deploy ECS at scale and very quickly. The rest, I'm going to talk about how VMware SD-WAN allowed you to deploy really quickly. Of course, SD-WAN is really good for delivering data from the edge to the data center, and we can use built-in security features and Symantec features as well to protect all the assets and everything in your network. Okay, so let's talk about SD-WAN for a minute. So VeloCloud's been around for about 12 years, okay? And during those 12 years, we got this thing figured out. We help customers deploy SD-WAN at scale. So we started out with VMware SD-WAN, and we slowly added remote access. That product is called VMware SD-Access. We added security to it. And now we added ECS support to the orchestrator. So there's a single cloud-hosted orchestrator that supports all these functions. Okay? So with one orchestrator, you can deploy, you can monitor, you can troubleshoot all the components right there. So the first thing that the orchestrator can help is with zero-touch provisioning. Okay? So imagine you have to deploy 1,000 sites. So what you can do is you can go to the orchestrator, define a network and security policy. So it'll be like, what VLAN do I belong to? How do I get my IP addresses, my application policy, QoS policy, and all that stuff, right? And then I can also define an edge computing policy with the desired state, okay? So once I define those two, all I have to do is ship the boxes out to the branch office. Someone there plug it in. They don't have to be knowledgeable about IT or ECS. They just plug it in. The boxes will call home and contact the orchestrator. Is going to download all the policies. Is going to download all the latest firmware, boot to self backup, and you're up and running. Okay? That way, there's no one, you don't need to send any IT personnel at the edge. It's really scalable. There's no security risk if the box is lost or stolen. And no side-by-side profile needed, right? You just need to have one profile. On the SD-WAN side, I know one customer that deployed 9,000 sites in 9 business days. That's how scalable this thing is, right? And then for policies, I think we have about 50, 60,000 customers or so. And when I ran the report, on average, each customer has like 1.05 policies, right? You're talking about networking policies. So management is really easy from the SD-WAN point of view. Deployment is also easy. And that's why, when we add ECS to this portfolio, it makes it easier for you to address everything at the edge, including ECS. Okay? So besides deployment, we also help you with troubleshooting and visibility. So on the edge, of course, we look at quality of the link. We help you debug down to the application level, but we also look into the servers and look at the health of the server, whether it's overloaded with CPU, with memory. So by looking at this, you can tell the overall health of your ECS and SD-WAN status. But then we did something beyond that. We also look into the LAN and figure out what's connected to our network, okay? So in edge computing, I think there's going to be a lot of IoT devices. So the first thing that we do is we identify and categorize all the IoT devices in the network, and we start baselining them, okay? So for example, if I have a cash register, and that cash register has been talking to one server in the data center, that's my baseline, right? And now suddenly it's talking to 5 different servers in the internet. That is a deviation that I need to take a look at, okay? Second thing we do is we also look at the services running inside the branch office. Things like DNS, DHCP server, the strength of your Wi-Fi signal, for example, right? So we know whether whether you have a problem with those or not. And then we baseline them and compare them with your peers in the industry, in the same vertical, having the same number of branch offices, for example. So when you put all these together, we look at, we can provision, we can monitor, and we can tell you right away whether it's an endpoint issue, whether it's a WAN issue, or whether it's an application issue, right? All together from the same console. All right, so the features that I talk about has more to do with the orchestrator and how we deploy, monitor, and troubleshoot, okay? The next section is about how we transport the data reliably from the edge of the network up to the cloud. So when people think about edge computing, they usually think, you know, I have a workload running down here, and it's pretty autonomous, right? I don't need to send anything back up, but that's not entirely true, because if you look at the use cases, for example, like if you have a $2 million machine in manufacturing, and you deploy a vibration sensor, electrical sensor, and a thermal camera pointing at it, right? Every second, it sends out some data. That's a lot of data, right? And you put together a policy that says, if the machine is vibrating a little bit more than usual, if I draw more current, right, to compensate for maybe a ball bearing running out, or if there's a hotspot, then you alarm, right? But that's one single policy that you have to define yourself. So what if we filter the data and send the data back to the cloud, right? The cloud may have machine learning analytics. It may have some storage in a different cloud that you need to send back to. So you need a very reliable WAN layer that understands your application, okay? Same thing for live streaming. If you have a remote site that's, you know, something's happening, you want to have a solid streaming back to the headquarters so you can see what's going on, right? Everything that you need there needs an intelligent WAN layer. And we happen to have this really cool feature called DMPO, or Dynamic Multipath Optimization. So DMPO works by, first of all, figuring out what kind of application am I getting, okay? It understands about 4,000 or 4,300 applications by default, and it categorizes them into different categories. And so by default, out of the box, your Netflix traffic is gonna get lower priority than your Zoom traffic, for example, right? And the second thing that it does is it looks at all the uplinks, all the WAN uplinks, and it starts to monitor the status of those uplinks. So at any point in time, it understands which link is performing better, okay? And then it's gonna send the best, the most critical business application over the best performing link, all right? So let's say you have two links, and one of them is experiencing degradation. It's going to switch over to the other link automatically, all right, with the next packet. Now, if you have two links and both of them are experiencing issues, or if you have one link, then it's going to move to the next stage called on-demand remediation. So what we do there is for very important applications, we actually duplicate the packet, and we send both packets to the other side, whether you have one link or two links, right? What that does is it doubles the chance of the other side receiving that packet, and then the other side is going to discard all the duplicate packets and send the whole stream up to the application layer, okay? So what that does is it actually cleans up the jitter, delay, packet drop of the underlying circuits, okay? So that is, that is on the left-hand side, right? Because the last mile, especially with 5G, with satellite, is very lossy, right? So DMPO comes in and cleans all that up. And then it's gonna pass the traffic to a POP, or point of presence, where we deploy what we call VMware SD-WAN gateway in the POP. And then these POPs are usually deployed in the biggest data centers in the world. So by the time your packet gets to the pub, it's right at the doorstep of these IaaS and SaaS applications. And when you put it together, your application is going to work really well, okay? Especially over a lossy medium like satellite or 5G. And on the security side, we also have technologies that can protect your infrastructure from either attacks, web attacks, or attacks within the branch offices. So we have two places that we have the solution for. We have a stateful firewall built into the edge of the network. So if your traffic never goes to the internet, like a branch-to-branch communication, for example, it doesn't hit the POP, right? It doesn't hit the internet. It just goes branch-to-branch. You need a local firewall there to protect that kind of traffic, okay? So we have a stateful firewall, we have URL filtering, we have IPS, IDS to catch all these attacks, and we have IP database reputation as well. Now, if you have your traffic going to the internet, to the web, SaaS, IaaS, we have Symantec in the portfolio now that we are on the Broadcom. Symantec and SD-WAN is going to be one offer. It's a single vendor SASE offer. SASE stands for Secure Access Service Edge. Basically, it's a convergence of SD-WAN and cloud security together in one single cloud hosted offer, okay? So we have Symantec protecting, the end devices and the users from web attacks. So we have things like, data loss prevention. We have sandboxing, so we can protect users from day 0 and day 1 attacks. And we have a suite of other features like, CASB, DLP, and a lot of features, right? So now this is a new offer. Now you can deploy both SD-WAN and Symantec together as a single vendor SASE. Okay? Any questions on how things work? All right, before Kiran comes on, I'd like to go over the deployment scenario really quickly. So on your right-hand side, this is how customers usually deploy SD-WAN and ECS, right? They would buy a separate SD-WAN edge, and they would buy a different ECS box to run separately, right? That makes sense because we have dedicated appliances running on it. But then our edges is also available in a software form factor. We call it a virtual edge. So for people, who like simplicity, who likes to have only 1 or 2 platforms at the edge of the network to make it easier for, hot standby and all that stuff, you can have one box, and then you can deploy the virtual edge, SD-WAN edge on it, and then you can also deploy your workload alongside that virtual edge to make it a lot simpler for, management, for deployment, and for operations. Okay, Kiran?
Okay, so let me briefly introduce CoEvolve's role in this, and we'll talk a little bit about how we've taken a client along this journey, starting with SD-WAN and then taking advantage of some of these newer capabilities that are now possible with ECS. So a brief intro to CoEvolve. We're a 10-year-old business that was set up purely to help multinational enterprises adopt next-generation technologies. And SD-WAN, SASE, SSE are kind of the cornerstone of those service offerings we provide for our clients today. So we were one of the very first global partners to deploy the VeloCloud solution back in 2015, and we've kind of built on that foundation since then. So lots of global experience. We've got sites under management today in just over 80 countries, and we take what we call a telco-independent approach. So we're not in a position where we own any of the underlying infrastructure. We will help our clients source connectivity from any and all infrastructure providers around the world. And we're using 750 plus ISPs and telcos in that environment today. So it's a really well optimized underlay layer there, where we're literally choosing the right mix of providers at every single location to get the outcomes that our clients are looking for. So we've got a lot of experience in environments where I would describe the connectivity and security piece as absolutely mission critical. So many of our clients are manufacturing. We've got clients in engineering, construction, logistics, those types of industries as well. And what we like to say is that we operate networks for our clients in those environments where we don't get the luxury of saying, oh, it's down and we'll take a look at it when we get a chance and it'll be back up sometime. We're dealing with typically seconds before the end users or the business process gets impacted by the outage and needing very focused efforts to get things resolved. So that includes monitoring and managing the SD-WAN piece. We also do a lot on the other end of this in terms of cloud networking. We've got a lot of clients that extend their networks into things like Azure Virtual WAN and the equivalents in AWS and Google. So really modernizing that whole infrastructure and providing what we would describe as that digital foundation for some of the more strategic initiatives that they may want to do on top of that. So what we see, and we're coming from the position that we're looking at this from, obviously our expertise and our history is in SD-WAN. And Chris, I think, did a really good job there of describing all of the features and benefits that clients are gaining by having this type of SD-WAN solution in place. SD-WAN is a term that gets thrown around a lot, and there's a massive variation between this SD-WAN and all of the features that you saw in some of those screenshots and some of the basic kind of automatic VPN type solutions that exist out there. And we've seen clients benefit from having that full-featured SD-WAN capability as that foundation for their network. And we see many different use cases that are kind of the entry points for clients wanting to deliver this type of technology into their environment. So whether it's transforming that branch office network and modernizing that, replacing some legacy components, whether it's enabling just very rapid deployments. And the telco industry in particular is known for long lead times, lots of delays, construction problems, getting links into sites and so on. Using this mix of connectivity providers and bringing in things like Starlink and other low Earth orbit satellite into the mix, we're able to really transform that environment and very rapidly deploy networks across all of these client locations, even in some really challenging geographies. And then the third example to pull out here is that building cloud-ready infrastructure. So traditional networks are just not cloud-ready. If you're using traditional routers and MPLS networks and all of those legacy components, it does not deliver the overall end-user experience or business outcomes that enterprises want to achieve as they start to move more workloads to the cloud. So having the SD-WAN piece in there as the foundation that underpins all of this really makes a significant difference when you're trying to get to that end state. So the example I wanted to talk through, we've got one of our clients is a large global manufacturing business. They're in the industrial manufacturing business, so making machinery and tools that are in turn used in many cases by other manufacturers and so on. And they have a significant environment. They've got about 40 to 50,000 employees. And they came from a very traditional networking environment. So they had an MPLS network, they had traditional Cisco routers and so on at their locations. And they realized that what they had in place was really holding them back. It was the last piece of their infrastructure where they felt that they weren't able to deliver what the business was asking for because it just simply didn't meet the requirements and couldn't be scaled far enough to where they needed to get it to. So we were able to, with this client, starting back in 2019 and even some earlier discussions before that, completely replace that solution using an internet-centric infrastructure at the edge. So hundreds of ISPs, typically 2 or 3 different ISP connections at each location, integrating local, regional, global type options into the mix so you get this real backbone diversity, and use that to be able to provide the starting point for a much more modern network environment. So they went, in many cases, from a very, very limited, maybe 2 meg or 4 meg of MPLS bandwidth, really expensive MPLS bandwidth at a site, to 50, 100, 200 meg connections in many cases. So vastly increasing the amount of bandwidth that they had available, and then being able to deliver on some of the more strategic initiatives that they wanted to have. In addition to that, so that solves the edge, so you're able to get a really well-optimized underlay at the edge. They also worked with us to implement a global backbone alternative, so software-defined backbone as well. So working with providers that can spin up and spin down intercontinental paths, really hour by hour, depending on when you actually need that capacity, and go completely in the other direction from those long-term, high-cost MPLS contracts where you'd have to predict how much bandwidth you might need for the next 3 years and then pin that up for all that time. So we enabled both at the edge and in the core a much more modern way of getting traffic both into the network, but also then across those long-distance traffic flows back to the core of the network. So it was a great success story, and that's kind of the entry point for this particular conversation, to show that we're starting here from the position of a successful transformation for a client, where we were able to deliver all of these outcomes and go from that legacy environment to the modern SD-WAN environment with a great deal of success. And what we found is that that state, so the state that we were in at the end of that deployment, and we've since renewed and extended the scope of the agreement, but we found that increasingly when you deal with and keep in a very stable state the piece of the environment that was causing a lot of sleepless nights and fire drills every day of the week in the past, you can now get to a point where you're having much more strategic business-related conversations with the client. And it's part of a strategic initiative on our part as well to get deeper into some of these particular industry verticals, because we can see that we are well positioned to solve many of the challenges that these businesses are dealing with. So in the case of this client, what we started to hear was that the IT piece was now looking pretty good and well modernized and working as well as they wanted it to, but they were now starting to look at their OT environment, their operational technology environment, to see how that piece could be digitized and how they could start to deliver more value to the business there. And we embarked on a series of discussions with this client around this whole concept of the factory floor of the future. And what does that look like when you take previously very, very locked down legacy environments that purely handled one specific piece of the production process, and maybe open that up to look at some more modern ways of working. And again, it's very much that transition from hardware to a software-based approach that is enabling a lot of these types of use cases. So all the way on the left there, we talk about augmenting cloud workloads, and that's very much along the lines of what Chris was talking about a moment ago, where there are now workloads that these enterprises want to run that just aren't feasible in the cloud. Too much data, too demanding in terms of latency requirements, the need to do really advanced processing of data and even running things like GPUs and so on, all the way out at the edge. That's enabling completely new modes of operation that didn't exist before. You've got a whole set of equipment on the production line process, legacy PLCs that previously were pretty much black boxes that existed purely to do that one particular function. Now we're starting to see an opportunity to open that up and provide a software platform that software-based PLC replacements can then be run across the top of. And that allows much more scalability. It allows the whole infrastructure to be maintained at a much higher level of security than it was before. You can apply patching and updates and modernize that environment on a continuous basis, where in the past you didn't trust it because it was never touched, it was never updated, so you completely kept it walled off from the rest of the environment. That's not really an option for many businesses anymore, because they want to be able to connect elements of that OT environment to the internet, to cloud services and so on, because of all the value of that data. They want to be able to tap into that really rich source of data that exists out at the edge, but you just can't do that with a legacy environment. The risk is just too great at the most critical and vulnerable part of the business. So this provides a way for these businesses to achieve that particular outcome. We can then start to help the business use the value of that data. They can turn on flows of data to do things like predictive maintenance and analytics and determining, very much along the lines of what Chris spoke about earlier, those types of use cases where you can apply many different sensors to a particular problem and then start to use the vast amounts of data there to be able to get ahead of some of these issues before they actually start to impact the business. And then you now have a software platform that is well positioned to run things like advanced robotics. Instead of having a rack of dedicated servers for many of these functions, that can now be consolidated. You reduce the hardware footprint, you simplify maintenance and so on. That now is enabling some of these use cases that previously may be out of reach for some of these manufacturers. So starting from that SD-WAN foundation, we're now enabling all of these interesting value-added use cases over and above that. And then you take that positioning and you look at where we go next. And I think here there's an opportunity to really start to look at how you can extract the most value out of these OT environments and how you can enable workflows that just weren't possible before. So many manufacturers, and we hear this every day of the week, they operate completely separate infrastructure for their OT environments. They've got separate LAN switches, they've got separate protocols running in that environment, they've even got separate private WAN connectivity in some cases that are joining components of that together between manufacturing facilities. We're now starting to see SD-WAN being an enabler for a far greater level of convergence between these environments. So using things like the enhanced firewall service that Chris mentioned earlier, that allows us to very clearly segment and securely segment the IT side from the OT side, but allow those critical traffic flows that need to happen to occur safely and securely in that environment. So it's very much a proposition around making best use out of all of the innovation that's already happened on the IT side of the business, but opening that up in a very safe, secure way for OT as well so that they can start to benefit. So that's an example of the type of journey that we're able to take clients on using this platform. We're, as I said, coming at it from that position of being very, very focused domain experts on the SD-WAN side. And I think you can see from this how that provides a very strong foundation to be able to do some of these really interesting initiatives with these emerging capabilities and taking advantage of the very similar concepts in terms of the orchestration and management of the solution and not having to go and deploy something completely in parallel for the client, but actually build on the concepts that are already there. So yeah, thank you very much. That's my side of it, and then we can wrap up.
Thank you, Kieran. Any questions for either me or Kieran? Hopefully, we convince you that running ECS on top of SD-WAN is awesome, and Oreo cookies are awesome. Yes.
So, is there any performance degradation on the hardware when you turn on the ECS stack?
So the question is there any degradation on the hardware?
Yeah.
When you turn on ECS stack?
Processing aspect of the hardware.
Everything that we don't need at the edge, and we make it lighter, so you can deploy, ECS in one node platform, for example. So it's not any lighter, it's not any heavier, it's definitely lighter than the usual.
And to build on that, it was one of Chris's slides earlier. We're actually looking at potentially two different deployment models for that can help completely de-risk that. So you can have this scenario where it's actually running, the SD-WAN piece doesn't get touched and this sits alongside it, but sitting under the same orchestrator. So in that scenario, I think maybe you're asking, coming from the SD-WAN side, are you kind of degrading its performance? Yeah, you can completely separate the two, but have them orchestrated in the same way, or provision a box that's able to deal with a virtual SD-WAN image and carve out resources on that box for it as well. So yes. We've seen clients interested in both models there. The model on the right keeps a really nice separation between the different maybe domains of responsibility on the client side. The model on the left, smaller hardware footprint, one box to get a maintenance contract on. So there's kind of pros and cons on both sides there that we've seen.
Right, and we also have that feature, real-time processing, is it?
Yeah.
That is needed when you replace PLCs, because PLCs need a dedicated resource, right? So unlike, ESXi doesn't have that, but ECS has that just because that is the requirement in the manufacturing space. So we are able to guarantee, computing and memory resources just dedicated to that one PLC. So there's that separation as well. Any other questions or comments? All right, if not, thank you very much for joining us today. And please do remember to take the survey. Am I going up or down? Oh, okay. And Of course, you can also access a lot of our resources online. You can see a list there. All right. Thank you, Kieran, for joining me.
No worries. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for joining.
Great. Thank you.